pilots, which leads us to another article about SAP having an announcement about their collaborative agent called, which I guess they call Joule, or their,
Joule.
I don't know if it's a copilot, but yeah, and having now support for open LLMs. And I think it's interesting, a couple salient points, and you can add some color to this. But the first thing is that their agent Joule only runs in the SAP ecosystem. Um, on the one hand, so that's just a closed sort of mindset, and on the other hand, they're embracing this idea of open LLMs, and I'm not just because they don't want to pay potential competitors of OpenAI and Anthropic and others or Microsoft, but I thought it was this really interesting juxtaposition of open source LLMs with a closed ecosystem sort of an approach. But I think part of it here is that if you're SAP, on the one hand, you want to provide air cover of saying, "Hey, we're doing things that are innovative and we're staying with the times, and look, here's our AI agent and all of that." But by the other side of it, it's like they don't sort of they're sort of like the mainframe. It's like if you got SAP, what are you going to do? I mean, even if you wanted to change, you're just going to change to another legacy provider of ERP.
Right.
There's really no innovation or need for innovation for the most part in this space. It's happening around the edges. And so, I mean, if you're a company like SAP, we've talked about them over the last several months with lots of turnover and whatever. And I guess it makes great stuff to chat about. But the reality is they just keep chugging along like an Oracle, like an IBM, doing this bread and butter business. And I don't see that changing.
Yes, SAP and Oracle are the Coke and Pepsi of ERP, and much like this in the soda world, like you're not going to choose other than those two big options if you're looking for a default soda or ERP or whatever option, simply because you want a robust database and you want support across each department of your company. And frankly, there are only a few applications that are designed to do that out of the box at the scale and customization that a large enterprise supports. It's simply not worth getting in the game for almost anybody else. And then you have Infor, which is trying to be, I don't know, like Dr. Pepper or Mountain Dew or something, whatever the next tier is. But it does, I think that this raises kind of an interesting thought exercise of what that next generation ERP might look like. Because SAP is trying to say if you've got this generative AI co-pilot, which there's this Joule, that you're going to be able to do this. And they're not alone with that because Benioff has long said for Salesforce that Slack was going to be the next big OS or UX for Salesforce. People have been entranced with this idea of natural language based interactions to get to all of your data for a while. But the real question, I think, for me is whether that's going to end up being through a SAP or a Salesforce that is holding the majority of your enterprise data, or whether we are going to be sprawling this through, call it 20 core apps, and having some sort of brain in the middle to actually handle that ERP-like work going forward. And I think SAP needs to, honestly, if they wanted to prepare for the future, they would start thinking about that expanded application model and supporting that a little bit more than only being wedded to the SAP data.
Well, what's interesting is I mean, they have. I mean, I was impressed. This is back when Bill McDermott was still the CEO of SAP,
Mhm.
but I was at Sapphire. I don't know, this was 6, 7 years ago, and I was actually really impressed with. They had an entire section on design thinking. I mean, they've always tried to sort of push the boundaries of like helping their customers look further abreast of things, right, or further afield. But that said, it's, and we've talked before about some of the challenges with moving to S/4HANA, and I mean, it's just really at the end of the day, this is blocking, tackling stuff. It is not for the most part a source of innovation or a source of differentiation for any customer. It's the
Mhm.
blocking, tackling that has to get done, and how much energy. And anyone who's ever tried to transition off of SAP or Oracle for that matter, and go vice versa, it's like all this pain and suffering, a massive amount of money, and for what? So I think that's the real issue, and that's why they're so stuck. Now, I think there's some long-term risk here, right? If we play this out in long term, in the world of AI and high tech now, 5, 10 years from now, right now, the biggest reason for all of that is all the customization, all of the integration, the deep integration into supply chains and workflows and all of that. that right now, to your point, is the only way to replace it would be with this entire collection of applications, and the overhead and the integration nightmares are, you're guaranteed disaster. AI could change that, right? AI could provide an interface layer that has enough intelligence to stitch all of that together, where an end user maybe is able to avoid that, not see what's happening under the covers, and I could see where there's a threat to it. But again, I ask the question: if I'm a CIO today and I have a technology that can do that, is this where I'm going to apply it first?
Mhm.
It's going to have a massive cost savings to make that make sense, and that's where I think their protection layer is. The cost of change and the risk of change is so high that it's really hard to justify that until someone has a proven case study around it.
True. So I still think this is $1 billion idea, but it's probably also going to cost $1 billion to build. Let's be honest about it. Uh, so someday our children or our children's children will see the next generation of ERP. But I agree that it's probably not going to actually change anytime soon, given the
Well,
massive
if somebody
investments.
if somebody does that, I predict they'll get the Nobel Prize for doing it, right?
Yes, maybe the Nobel Prize in physics.